There are moments when life becomes strangely quiet and your mind begins to wander toward a question you don't usually ask. What would my life look like if I had chosen differently? Not because you necessarily regret the life you have. Maybe you're happy with many of the choices you made. Maybe you wouldn't change much at all. But somewhere in the back of your mind, there may still be another version of you. A version who took the job you turned down. A version who moved to a different city. A version who stayed in a relationship that ended. A version who followed an interest you eventually put aside because life became busy, expensive, complicated, or simply took you in another direction. We often think of our lives as one continuous story. We remember what happened, the decisions we made, the people we met, and the places we lived. But perhaps our lives are also surrounded by stories that never happened. Lives that were possible for a while. Lives we could almost see. And then at some point, they quietly disappeared and simply became the lives we never lived. And sometimes, years later, we still wonder about them. What would that other version of me be like now? Would I recognize them? Would they be happier? Would they look at my life and wonder what it would have been like to become me? It's an unusual thing to think about. We can miss a person who is no longer in our lives. We can miss a place we used to live. We can miss a time that has passed. But can we miss a life that never existed? Perhaps we can. Because even though those lives never became real, the possibilities were real to us at one time. Maybe you once imagined yourself living somewhere else. You pictured the streets, you thought about what your home might look like. You imagined making new friends, finding your way around, and building an entirely different routine. Then something changed. You stayed where you are. Maybe it was the right decision. Maybe there were good reasons for it. Maybe you barely think about it now. But every so often you see a photograph of that city or hear someone talk about living there. And something small moves inside you. Not necessarily regret. Maybe it's curiosity. You wonder what happened to the person you might have become if you had gone. would you have been more confident? Would you have a quieter life? Would you have met people who changed everything? Or would you eventually have discovered that the life you imagined was never quite as good as the life you already had? The truth is, we'll never know. And perhaps that is part of what makes these unlived lives so powerful. They never had the chance to become ordinary. The life you are living has bills, responsibilities, disappointments and difficult days, and things you wish were different. But the life you didn't choose remains untouched by all of that. In your imagination, it can stay beautiful. It can remain full of possibility because it was never tested by reality. The career you didn't pursue never became stressful. The city you didn't move to never became expensive or lonely. The relationship that never happened never had difficult conversations or ordinary disagreements. The dream you left behind never had the chance to disappoint you. We sometimes compare our real lives to imagined lives without noticing that we are comparing something complicated and complete with something unfinished. One life had to deal with reality. The other remained a possibility. And possibilities can be very convincing. Think about a decision you made years ago. Was there another choice sitting beside it? Perhaps you accepted one job while wondering about another. Perhaps you chose security when part of you wanted adventure. Perhaps you stayed close to family when you had the chance to leave. Perhaps you left when everyone expected you to stay. At the time, you probably didn't know how important the decision would become. Most of us don't. We imagine that life changes through a few enormous moments, but many changes happen quietly. You answer an email, you say yes to an invitation, you decide not to call someone, you take a job because it seems practical, you put something off for another year, then 1 year becomes 5, and eventually you look around and realize you are living a life that was built from hundreds of decisions, some carefully considered and some made almost without thinking. That can be unsettling. How much of who we are comes from choices we made deliberately, and how much came from timing, circumstances, luck, or simply being in the right place when something happened. If one small decision had gone differently, would you still be the same person? Maybe not. You might have different friends. You might speak differently. You might have developed interests you don't have now. You might have learned lessons you never needed to learn in this life. There may be versions of you who are more confident, more adventurous and successful, or more settled. But there may also be versions of you who are struggling in ways you never had to experience. That is something we often forget. When we imagine the lives we didn't live, we usually imagine the parts that would have been better. We imagine the opportunity working out. We imagine the relationship lasting. We imagine the move changing everything. But another life would have brought its own losses. It would have required you to leave things behind. It would have introduced problems you cannot see from where you are standing now. Every path gives us something, and every path asks us to give something up. There's no life where we get to keep every possibility. Choosing one direction means letting another one go. Even when the choice is right, there can still be a small sense of loss. Maybe that is why some decisions stay with us. Not because we made a mistake, but because we understood somewhere deep down that choosing one future meant saying goodbye to another. And sometimes those goodbyes happen without us noticing. There may be people you once expected to know forever. Not because you made a promise, but because they were a part of your everyday life. You worked together, you saw each other every week. You shared jokes, routines, and ordinary conversations. Then life changed. Someone moved. Someone changed jobs. The messages became less frequent. And eventually the relationship belonged to another part of your life. You didn't only lose the person, you also lost the future you assumed the two of you would share. The birthdays you thought they would be present for. The conversations you expected to have years later. The version of your life where they remained familiar. That future disappeared quietly. And perhaps there are many losses like this that we don't know how to name. Possibilities that slowly stop being possible. A future that once seemed likely became a future that never arrived. Maybe you once thought you would have children. Maybe you assumed you would be married by a certain age. Maybe you believed you would own a home, travel more, change careers, write a book, start a business, or live somewhere completely different. Some of those things may still happen, others may not. And there can be a strange sadness in recognizing that life did not unfold the way you once imagined. But perhaps there is also something important to understand. The younger version of you who imagined that future did not know everything you know now. They wouldn't see the people you would meet. They didn't know what you would learn. They didn't know which things would become important to you and which things would slowly lose their meaning. You may have become someone they never expected. And although that person may not match the picture they once had, that doesn't mean your life went wrong. It simply means life kept moving. You changed. Your priorities changed. The meaning of a good life may have changed too. Maybe the things you once wanted no longer fit the person you are today. And that raises another question. When we look back at the lives we never lived, are we really missing those lives? Or are we missing the feeling of possibility we had when we were younger? There's something special about believing that many futures are still open. When we are young, life can feel wide. We may not know where we are going, but that uncertainty can also feel exciting. There are so many things we might become. Then, as the years pass, some doors close. Not always because we failed. Sometimes time simply moves on. Certain opportunities belong to a particular stage of life. Certain versions of ourselves become less likely, and we begin to understand that we cannot become everything. That can feel sad, but perhaps it also gives our actual life more meaning. A life becomes real because it's limited. If every path remained open forever, would any choice truly matter? Part of what makes our lives valuable may be that they are shaped by the things we choose and by the things we had to leave behind. Your life is not only the collection of opportunities you accepted, it is also the result of the opportunities you didn't take, the people you didn't meet, the places you didn't go, the versions of yourself you never became. They are all part of the story, even though they never happened. And perhaps that is why they still visit us. Sometimes you hear a song from a certain year and remember the person you were then. You remember what you hoped would happen. You remember the plans you made. For a moment you can almost feel the future you expected waiting ahead of you. Then you remember where life actually took you. And the distance between those two futures can feel surprisingly emotional. You may feel grateful. You may feel sad. You may feel curious. Sometimes you may feel all of those things at once. There's no rule that says you must either be thankful for your life or wonder about another life. You can appreciate what you have and still be curious about what might have been. You can know you made the right decisions and still feel the loss of the road you didn't take. Those feelings are not necessarily contradictions. They may simply be part of being human. We carry memories of the past. We live in the present, and somewhere in our imagination, we continue to carry futures that never arrived. Maybe we don't need to solve the question of whether those other lives would have been better. We can't know. The version of you who moved away may have been happier or lonelier. The version who took the other job may have become successful or exhausted. The version who stayed in the relationship may have felt loved or trapped. Every imagined life contains unknowns, and perhaps we can stop asking which version would have been better. Maybe the more interesting question is, what does the life I didn't choose reveal about what mattered to me? If you still think about moving somewhere else, perhaps you value freedom or change. If you still remember the career you didn't pursue, perhaps there was something meaningful in that work that you still miss. If you wonder about a relationship that ended, perhaps you are missing a feeling you had during that time, not necessarily the person themselves. The lives we never lived may still have something to teach us, not because we should go back and recreate them. Some doors are closed for good, but the desires behind those old possibilities may still be alive. Maybe you can't return to the exact path you once imagined, but perhaps you can bring a small part of it into the life you have now. You may not move to the city you once dreamed about, but you might travel there. You may not begin the career you imagined 20 years ago, but you may still be able to learn something connected to it. You may not become the person you expected to be, but you can still ask yourself who you want to become from here. The past does not have to become a place we live in. It can simply be a place we visit. We can look around, remember what mattered, understand what changed, and then return to the life that is actually ours. Because this life, the one you are living now, was once only a possibility too. There was a time when you didn't know where you would end up. You didn't know the people you would meet. You didn't know which moments would change now. You didn't know what you would lose, what you would gain, or who you would become. The life you have today was once one of the many futures waiting ahead of you. And somehow, through choices and accidents and timing and courage and hesitation and luck and circumstances you couldn't control, you arrived here. Not at the life you imagined perfectly, but at a real one, a complicated one. A life with memories and disappointments, unexpected joys, and people who may never have existed in any of those other possible futures. Maybe there are other versions of you somewhere in your imagination. The one who chose differently, the one who left, the one who stayed, the one who took the chance, the one who never did. We may wonder about them from time to time. We may even miss them, but they don't need to become reasons to reject the life we have. They can simply remind us that our lives could have gone in many directions and that every person we become is shaped by both the paths we followed and the paths we left behind. So perhaps the question is not what would my life have been if I had chosen differently. Perhaps the question is, what can I still do with the life I chose? And maybe that is where the lives we never lived become most meaningful. Not when they pull us away from the present, but when they help us understand what we still value and what we still hope for, and what parts of ourselves may still be waiting to be discovered. Because even now, your life is not finished. There are still choices ahead. There are still versions of you that have not arrived. And somewhere in the future, the person you become may look back at this moment and realize that today was another turning point. Another quiet place where more than one path was waiting. And once again, without knowing exactly where it would lead, you choose. This is Quiet Echoes. Welcome to the channel. I will see you in the next video.